Now in our 26th year, more than a quarter of a century of service to the worldwide amateur radio community, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, your all-amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. This is edition number 1361 with a release and air date of Saturday, March 29, 2025. Please take the program to your air following the cue tone.
On the air around the world on the amateur radio bands, streaming on the internet, and podcasting since 1993, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, the worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the earth as we come to air with edition number 1362 of This Week in Amateur Radio. Amateur radio operators assist with health and welfare communications as a deadly earthquake shakes Myanmar. The Voice of America is fighting its way back on the air. The United States Naval Undersea Warfare Center looks to amateur radio for backup communications. April is Ham Radio Open House Month. We will have all the details on how you and your club can take part on World Amateur Radio Day. ARL New Hampshire section signs a Memorandum of Understanding with the State Department of Safety and Emergency Services. The FCC wants you to share your opinion on the Delete initiative. Radio amateurs are punished for illegally setting up stations to gather sensitive data and distribute misinformation. The FCC launches a proceeding to find global positioning system alternatives. The deadline is coming up for nominations for the CQ Amateur Radio Hall of Fame. And author Stephen King's AM radio station in Maine has gone silent. We didn't know he owned stations, did you? We will tell you all about the station shut down, and a lot more coming up in this week's report. These headline stories will come to you in a moment, along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Onno Benschop, Phi K6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio will answer the question, what is the difference between a dummy load and an antenna? Our own amateur radio historian, Will Rogers, K5WLR, returns with another new edition of A Century of Amateur Radio. This week, Will continues with part 2 of Crossings as amateurs in the mid-1920s find a challenge in crossing the Atlantic Ocean. And we will stop by and visit with Bill Salyers, AJ8B in the DX Corner, with all the latest news on DXpeditions, DX, upcoming radio sport contests, and more. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air right now.
Sitting in this week for Don Hulick, K2ATJ, this is W2XBS reporting from our headquarters studio here in wet, rainy, and damp Albany, New York.
And reporting this week from downtown Syracuse, New York, from our news bureau inside the Museum of Science and Technology at Station K2MST, I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
Reporting from our news bureau in Salem, Ohio, this is Denny Haight, NZ8D.
And reporting from our news bureau here in Naugatuck, Connecticut, where the strangest weather setup I've ever seen is set up for today. Temperatures in the 70s here, but just an hour and a half away up at my parents' house in northern Massachusetts, it'll be in the 30s today. Good Lord. I'm Steve Sawyer, K1FRC.
And reporting live from the warm and humid Space Coast in Florida, I am Ed Johnson, W2PH.
Reporting from our news bureau in Lebanon, Tennessee, where I'm waiting for another round of tornadoes to bore down upon me, I'm Al Shephard, WK8W.
And reporting from our Troy, New York News Bureau, where there are still no leaves on the trees, I'm Eric, Kilo Delta 2, Romeo Juliet X-Ray.
And reporting from our amateur radio outpost in the western Catskill Mountains of upstate New York, where spring has sprung and the grass is riz, I wonder where the flowers is. I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
And reporting from our somewhat soggy news bureau in Fayetteville, Arkansas, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR.
Our lead story this week brings us to Myanmar. A 7.7 magnitude earthquake struck near Mandalay, the second largest city in Myanmar, and rocked the region on Friday, the 28th of March. Hams in Thailand were among those who were called up to help with communications, particularly amid the wreckage in Bangkok. As the death toll climbed in a number of countries, emergency communications took a paramount importance in the South Asian nations hit by the earthquake. Its strength was felt in Bangkok, Thailand, affecting the city's high-rise buildings. The search for survivors continued beneath the wreckage of one prominent tower that had been toppled while under construction in the city. Jackery Hanticum, HS1 FVL, Emergency Communications Director of the International Amateur Radio Union Region 3, told IARU Region 1's Greg Mossop, G0DUB, that members of the Radio Amateur Society of Thailand have been assisting the government with emergency communications in the city and in the surrounding area, utilizing VHF. The death toll in the region itself was climbing well into the thousands as search and rescue efforts continued. We will keep an eye on the story and bring you updates next week.
Recent efforts by the Trump administration to defund and shut down international news organizations, like the Voice of America, have hit some roadblocks this past week. On Friday, a Manhattan federal judge temporarily blocked the White House from silencing the VOA, according to a blog post by legal news service Law 360. After a morning hearing, U.S. District Court Judge J. Paul Etkin issued a temporary restraining order saying the funding that was cut by the U.S. Agency for Global Media, VOA's parent company, was a classic case of arbitrary policymaking. Radio Free Asia, another international news organization, is also seeking court action to halt its shutdown. A group, including 6 VOA journalists, filed a federal lawsuit on March 21st to halt the cuts by the United States Agency for Global Media, or USAGM, which is the federal agency overseeing all U.S. civilian international media. The plaintiffs in their suit cited the lawlessness and discriminatory animus of USAGM's actions as a reason for the court's needed intervention. The VOA employees, which includes VOA's White House Bureau Chief Patsy Witekeswara, specifically named Victor Morales, CEO of the United States Agency for Global Media, and the government agency's special advisor, Carrie Lake, in their suit. They also cited President Trump's longtime displeasure with the news coverage disseminated by USAGM networks worldwide. Voice of America Director Michael Abramowitz also sued the Trump administration in different jurisdictions and asked the court to halt the dismantling of the government-funded media outlet. Abramowitz said it was unlawful to deny VOA its congressionally appropriated funds. The president's executive order in mid-March that cut off funding from USAGM effectively shuttered VOA's operations. As a result, more than 1,300 journalists and producers were placed on administrative leave. VOA content is produced in 49 languages and is broadcast on satellite, FM, AM, and shortwave. The news service broadcasts more than 2,300 hours of radio and television programming each week, reaching a measured global audience of 354 million people according to its website. It also reaches audiences via the web and social media platforms. VOA, which has been in operation for 83 years, has been accused by the Trump administration of broadcasting taxpayer-funded radical propaganda. The defunding was part of a larger effort by the White House to cut government spending on international news media through a series of executive orders. Earlier this week, a different federal judge issued a restraining order to halt the freezing of funding for Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty. However, in the case of Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty, the Trump administration restored the funding for fiscal year 2025 on Thursday. Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty have been on the air since the beginning of the Cold War. Meanwhile, yet another independent international news organization is asking a court to bar the termination of its funding. Radio Free Asia, or RFA, filed a lawsuit Thursday in district court saying USAGM does not have the authority to withhold appropriated funds. According to the latest suit, Congress directed that USAGM provide RFA its appropriated funds via grant agreements. USAGM has nevertheless refused to grant or disperse the appropriated funds on the basis that the grant no longer effectuates agency priorities. However, Congress did not give the United States Agency for Global Media discretion to unilaterally withhold RFA's congressionally appropriated funds, RFA says in the court filing. A USAGM spokesperson did not immediately respond to a request to comment on the recent developments.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
Amateur radio has provided the inspiration for a new initiative within the Resilient Communications Program at the U.S. Naval Undersea Warfare Center Division in the state of Washington. Organizers are working to use ham radio's reliability as the backup for its emergency communications when there are disruptions to the internet, computer function, or mobile phone services. The division's Director of Innovation in Keyport said that the program embraces the technology of ham radio for this purpose and will be establishing a network of licensed hams to make use of amateur radio frequencies when the need arises. Organizers have also been encouraging nearby naval bases to join in the effort. The Keyport team is reaching beyond the military, too. Everyone needs an Elmer, so organizers have contacted local ham radio clubs as well as emergency responders to help with training the new operators to grow the network. Some members of the team have already obtained their GMRS license for general mobile radio service, but acknowledge that the next step is the FCC's technician test to become a ham.
ARRL's Ham Radio Open House is happening all over the world in April, centered around April 18th, which is World Amateur Radio Day. John Ross, KD8IDJ, is here with all the details.
ARRL has joined forces with HamSci and SciStarter to encourage clubs to welcome the public into their ham radio stations. April is also Citizen Science Month, and we're hoping to help document 1 million acts of science as visitors get hands-on at the club stations. As of April 3rd, 35 clubs have signed up to host an ARRL Ham Radio Open House, and your club can get on that list too. Dozens of clubs around the country have already said they are participating in Ham Radio Open House, but it's not too late for your club to decide to take part. Whether you like to just list your club on the Ham Radio Open House site or find one near you to attend, use the locator tool at www.arrl.org/open-house. April 2025 is a centennial milestone, 100 years for the International Amateur Radio Union. Founded in Paris in 1925, RARU is the worldwide federation of national amateur radio organizations. The membership of the IARU consists of more than 160 member societies in as many countries and separate territories. ARRL serves as its international secretariat. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Once again, if you would like to list your club's Ham Radio Open House site or find one near you to attend, use the locator tool at www.awrl.org/open-house.
Radio clubs, schools, and other groups that operate a shared ham radio station are urged to join the nationwide event to raise the visibility of amateur radio and related technology. April is also Science Citizen Month, and April 18th is World Amateur Radio Day. It's also the 100th anniversary of the International Amateur Radio Union, making the month a perfect backdrop for engaging the public in an introduction to ham radio. You may know the experience when a newcomer visits your amateur radio station. They have a bit of overwhelmed amazement, taken aback by all the new sights and sounds. You explain to them what each technology is in front of them, and, the gear, the displays filled with radio signal waterfalls and other graphical interfaces, and the variety of sounds from Morse code and digital to the voices of faraway people. Look out the window and eyes are gazed on antennas of all shapes and sizes. And in the best of situations, that sensory overload turns into getting on the air, turns into a new member of this hobby of hobbies, turns into a new radio amateur. And that's the energy that we're tapping into for ARRL Ham Radio Open House. Show off all the cool things that can be done in amateur radio, leading with our technological innovations, how radio works, and what we can do with our signals. Follow up with getting the visitor hands-on. Let them participate in several of the 1 million acts of science that SciStarter is working to document as part of April being Citizen Science Month, that is. Get the visitor on the air. Make them feel part of it from the moment they walk in. With more details on the upcoming open house and the recommended steps you should follow, we go to our own Denny Haight, NZ8D.
The ARRL wants your club to be successful. Here are the steps to prepare for your club's ARRL Ham Radio Open House. First, pick a date. Select a date or dates any time in the month of April to host your club's station's open house to maximize visitor traffic to your operation. Next, use the media kit. ARRL has created a comprehensive media kit prepared by veteran public relations professionals on the ARRL Public Relations Committee. These pros want to help you shine and have given you a turnkey solution. Use as much or as little of it as you would like, but it's all there. The kit includes sample press releases, a public relations tip sheet, media outreach timeline, and more. Find it on the League's webpage. And don't forget its location, location, location. The ARRL Ham Radio Open House Locator tool is also available online. It is a two-way street. Add your club's information to the interactive tool or use it to find an activation already planned in your area. This is the same tool many are accustomed to using to find ARRL field day sites. Also take the opportunity to be a social media superstar. Social media is how many people find activities. Make sure your club is using the power of this outreach tool to spread the word of your event. In the Ham Radio Open House Media Kit, you'll find a section devoted to social media best practices. And finally, be ready for the next steps. You've planned for weeks. Visitors are showing up in droves. They are having a great time getting on the air. Don't leave them wondering what's next. Have a plan to get back in touch with them and welcome them to your next club meeting. Prepare a licensing class to enable them to dive right into becoming a ham. Let them know about your club's ARRL field day plans and have them be a part of them. The majority of active hams are ARRL members, so let your visitors know the value you get from an ARRL membership and encourage them to join. Don't forget about the free student membership for those aged 21 and under.
The ARRL New Hampshire section has established a Memorandum of Understanding with the New Hampshire Department of Safety and the Division of Emergency Services and Communications for work with the ARRL Amateur Radio Emergency Service. ARES will serve as the sole organization providing amateur radio communications support to the state. DESC will offer training and certification to ARES members and coordinate activities through the New Hampshire Emergency Operations Center. There are 11 ARES groups throughout the state, through which members volunteer their time performing public service communications. More information at nh-ares.org. Meanwhile, the Nashua Area Radio Society's Ham Boot Camp will be held Saturday, May 10th, 2025. The online event from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. is open to everyone and designed for newly licensed hams, experienced hams, or anyone just exploring the hobby. Boot Camp will offer demonstrations and tutorials, including building a station, getting on the air, and VHF equipment and activities. Special sessions include FT8, emergency communications, and operating via satellites. Whether you're interested in local communication, DXing, contesting, or just having fun on the air, there's something for everyone. For more information or to register, visit www.november1foxtrotdelta.org/ham-bootcamp. The Zoom link will be sent upon registration.
Get ready for 2025 ARRL Field Day, June 28th and 29th. This year's theme is Radio Connects. Get all the resources to start preparing for your participation at the League website, where you can order t-shirts and other official gear. The June issue of QST magazine will include a special section with additional advice and tips for Field Day, sponsored this year by LDG Electronics. The digital edition of June QST will be available on May 2nd, 2025.
Keeping the amateur radio community around the world informed, you are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio. Available worldwide as a podcast from our web at twiar.net.
China's State Security Agency this week revealed 2 cases of radio enthusiasts setting up illegal stations under foreign direction to gather sensitive data and spread disinformation. According to the Ministry of State Security, or MSS, radio technology underpins vital infrastructure. From supporting infrastructure operations to aiding emergency response, from ensuring secure communications to maintaining social stability, radio technology has a profound impact on national security and societal stability. However, unauthorized use poses a serious threat. Some radio hobbyists see foreign radio equipment as novel toys, unknowingly exposing themselves and the country to risk, the MSS warned. One case involves suspicious devices near a naval port, continuously intercepting sensitive signals. Investigators found the equipment belonged to Zheng, who is a radio enthusiast living near the naval port. He had accidentally received an email from a foreign data company offering him free radio equipment worth $138 US. He submitted his details and received and assembled the device on his balcony as instructed within a month. During its operation, the equipment collected a large amount of dynamic information of ship location in the waters near the port and transmitted the data abroad via Wi-Fi, threatening military security. Security authorities confiscated the equipment and penalized Zheng. In another case, the state security agencies discovered that a Chinese national, surnamed Zhang, illegally set up a radio station to spread false information and disrupted social orders under the direction of foreign forces. To promptly eliminate the threat, the state security agencies, in coordination with relevant departments, arrested Zhang. Zhang admitted that he met a foreign agent online who promised big rewards for broadcasting relevant content. He then bought the parts online, built the station under the agent's guidance, and received the content to broadcast. Zhang knew the material was false. However, he was tempted by money and thinking he'd get away with it. He now faces serious legal consequences. According to China's criminal law, whoever, in violation of the state regulations, sets up and uses a radio station or occupies radio frequencies without authorization, thereby interfering with the normal operation of radio communications, if the consequences are serious, shall be sentenced to fixed-term imprisonment of not more than 3 years, short-term custody, or non-custodial correction, and concurrently a fine, or shall be sentenced to a fine only. If the circumstances are especially serious, the offender shall be sentenced to fixed-term imprisonment of not less than 3 years, but not more than 7 years, and concurrently a fine.
In honor of the Handyham program's 58th anniversary, the Handyham Radio Club Minnesota is sponsoring a QSO party from 1900 Zulu, April 25th, to 1900 Zulu, April 27th, using club call signs Whiskey 0 Zulu Sierra Whiskey and Whiskey 0 Echo Quebec Oscar. The Handyham program provides tools for people with disabilities to learn technology skills and earn their amateur radio licenses. The object is for Handyham members to work as many stations as possible during the 48-hour operating period. The event also offers an opportunity to promote and share more details about the Handyham program and the Handyham radio clubs for those who are interested. The QSO party will be active on all amateur bands and modes to make contacts, including digital and voice-over IP modes. The exchange is simply name and state, province, or country. Stations will be using their own call signs in addition to the club call signs. Please listen for stations calling CQ Handyham 58.
The Federal Communications Commission wants to hear from you about which unnecessary regulations should be revised or eliminated. The FCC's current delete initiative asks the public to weigh in on old, outdated, or inefficient regulatory rules that should be changed or deleted in order to keep up with the changing landscape of mass communications. For too long, administrative agencies have added new regulatory requirements in excess of their authority or kept lawful regulations in place long after their shelf life had expired, said FCC Chairman Brendan Carr. The FCC is committed to ending all of the rules and regulations that are no longer necessary, and we welcome the public's participation and feedback throughout this process. The initiative asks people to consider several factors when determining what rules might be unnecessary, including negative cost benefit, technological advancements that render certain rules outdated, if it unnecessarily harms entrepreneurs or small businesses, or if it serves as a barrier to entry into the communications marketplace. Do you have thoughts or opinions on the FCC's regulatory rules? If so, you can share your ideas with the FCC on X or file comments directly until April 12th, 2025.
HAMSCI, Ham Radio Science Citizen Investigation, is preparing now for a series of meteor scatter experiments later this year and need amateur radio operators to help. While the target storms are in August with the Perseids and December with the Geminids, preparation and testing is already underway. This is a combination special event and a contest to generate contact data during media scatter events using 10 meters and 6 meters. 2025 contest rules will be released shortly. To be successful, this effort needs operators, both active and passive. Operators are needed to be active, as in calling CQ on MSK 144, or passive, if possible, reporting via PSK Reporter as monitors. The best times are early morning hours prior to 10-meter opening to F2 propagation. Meteor scatter propagation occurs well below F2 and is supported in or near the E layer, where the meteor ionization tracks occur. Saturday mornings are being used regularly to announce and coordinate 10-meter contacts using Ping Jockey Central. Announcements are also made on the Front Range 6-meter groups.io due to the substantial number of meteor scatter operators in that group. The upcoming April Lyrid shower is an excellent time to set up your equipment and join with other operators preparing for the events later this year. If you do not have the time to be active, at least set up passive reporting. PSK Reporter currently has scarce 10-meter MSK 144 monitors, so we need to increase these numbers during the early morning hours. Eventually, the HAMSCI team will be collecting operator contact information, but for now, all that is required is for participants to report through PSK Reporter. For more information on the operating guidelines for the activity, please visit Meteor Scatter QSO Party Guidelines on the HAMSCI webpage, www.hamsci.org, where you can also subscribe to their mailing list. HAMSCI serves as a means for fostering collaboration between professional researchers and amateur radio operators. It assists in developing and maintaining standards and agreements between all people and organizations involved. Its goals are to advance scientific research and understanding through amateur radio activities, encourage the development of modern technologies to support this research, and provide educational opportunities for the amateur community and the public.
The fight to keep AM radio as a mandatory service in new cars, including electric vehicles, is alive and well in New York City. One historic AM station in Manhattan has taken matters into its own hands to advocate for the senior band. A full-page advertisement by 77 WABC Radio was run in the New York Post, urging customers to only buy cars that come equipped with AM radio. The ad touts AM's importance, stating that the Federal Emergency Management Agency relies on this service to reach 95% of Americans during emergency situations, a well-known argument in favor of the proposed AM Radio for Every Vehicle Act. Speaking to car manufacturers that have plans to drop AM as a service, it explicitly says don't support companies that don't care about your safety in a time of need. You should know the companies that don't put you and your loved ones' safety first.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
Registration is now open for the ARRL Youth Rally at Dayton Hamvention. For more details on the Youth Rally, we go to our field reporter, John Ross, KD8IDJ.
This amazing event is set to be a great day, full of hands-on radio activities for people aged 11 to 21. Join fellow young people who are interested in ham radio, led by volunteers from the ARRL Collegiate Amateur Radio Program, as they make a fun day out of getting to know radio and getting to know each other. There will be an on-air sprint, contacts with a parachute mobile station, and a kit build in the youth lounge, and a fox hunt. While Hamvention offers free tickets for youth aged 12 through high school, advanced registration for the Youth Rally is recommended, though. The Youth Rally registration fee is $20, and it includes a T-shirt to wear on Saturday, a badge, a lanyard, and a reusable tote bag. The event is led by ARRL Education and Learning Manager Steve Goodgame, K5ATA. Young people are empowered to take leading roles in the hobby by participating in the ARRL Youth Rally. In 2024, then sixth grader Cameron Frey, KD9VGV, talked about his success as a Parks on the Air operator. I've done more than 100 central activations and more than 40 different parks. I've also hunted more than 700 different parks, he said. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
The ARRL Youth Rally is also a day full of smiles, fun, and empowerment. Make sure your young ham joins us in Dayton.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX as part of Ham Radio's oldest ham radio magazine on the air, This Week in Amateur Radio. I'm Bill, AJ8B. If you're watching this on YouTube, the text of this will be included in the show notes, so you won't have to worry about calls and dates and URLs. They'll be in the show notes. I have a couple of emails to pass along. First is an email from my friend Yanez, S51DX. He wrote, quote, Bill, thank you for the most recent newsletter. I wanted to let you know that I managed to make over 77,000 QSOs in 2024. I currently have over 788,000 QSOs overall in the logbook. I'm trying to be as active as I can this year, hoping to reach 164,000 QSOs in 2025. I hope to hear you on the bands and in the future. Good health to you and your family. 7-3 from Yanez, S51DX. Congratulations to Yanez. What an achievement. I can't imagine working that many people in 1 year, much less a lifetime. I also received this from Tim, N9PN. Quote, Hi, Bill. Despite having my license for over 26 years and HF privileges since 2007, I haven't really had an HF station until recently. My first contact was loaded into LOTW on January 24th, and I submitted for DXCC phone and mixed on March 11th. I received the message in LOTW that my application was completed on March 28th of 2025 at 1959 Zulu, 17 days later. I was able to accomplish this with a Flex 8600 station and a Mosley RV 7C vertical with 4 radials. Pretty cool, huh? I'm getting close with some single band numbers as well. I have 91 on 10 meters, I have 83 on 15 meters, and 80 on 20 meters. Hopefully, CQ Worldwide WPX will push those numbers a bit higher since everyone else loads their logs into LOTW. 7-3 for now. Keep up the good work. From Tim, N9PN. That is absolutely fantastic, Tim. Please let me know how you're doing and when you reach DXCC on each of those bands. I'll be pulling for you. As you know, I've been trying to focus on those entities that will be available in the next week. There's so much data to sift through that I thought just focusing on the next 7 days might be helpful. So this next 7 days information comes from the DX News from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the How's DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, as others have done, which is your only source of real-time DX information, just drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com. Here's what should be up in the coming week, and let me know how many of these you're able to work. FOC member DL1BUG Red is QRV from Cotonou in Benin as TY5FR from now until April 9th. He has an ICOM IC7300, a CG3000 auto tuner, and is running 100 watts into a 22-meter wire. Activity will be on CW and sideband on 80 through 10 meters, including 60 meters, Joe. He will upload his log to Club Log and LOTW later. Member societies of Bosnia and Herzegovina will have special call signs E7100 IARU on the air for the month of April to help celebrate the 100 years of the IARU. This one is planned to be on all the bands and all modes, and they normally have really cool QSL cards, so it'd be worth chasing them down. Bob, OZ1DJJ, is QRV from Nook and West Greenland is OX3LX until April 9th. This is Grid Square GP44DE and IOTA NA018. Bo says this is not a DXpedition, but a busy trip, so, quote, don't expect too much from me. And you can QSL this to OZ0J. ZA/IZ2DPX and ZA/IZ1CTE will be on the air from Saranda, Albania, April 8th through the 13th. You can QSL both via IZ2DPX or via the Bureau. LOTW will work as well, and you can do direct via OQRS. They plan to be on HF to 6 meters. And what's amazing is about 15 years ago, or 20, Albania was not even allowed to be on the air. And now there's DXpeditions there, and it's all very common. So it changes a lot. Flavio, IW2NEF, will be operating from the Maldives, holiday style, as 8 Quebec 7 Echo Fox now until April 10th, using digital modes and sideband on 40 through 6 meters. And you can QSL Flavio via IK2DUW or LOTW or Club Log OQRS. JD1BOI and JD1BON from Ogasawara will be activated by JI1LET and JA1UII from now till April 17th on sideband CW and FT8, FT4. And they will be on 160 through 6 meters. And you can QSL direct to their home QTHs or use LOTW. And that one it's fairly rare. So if you get a chance, you need to track them down. Taka plans an IOTA DXpedition to Ujishima, an uninhabited island located about 80 kilometers southwest of the tip of Kyushu, now till April 12th. He believes that this will be the first activation of Ujishimi in at least 11 years. Taka will be on CW, FM, and FT8. For FT8, he will be using JTX or MSHV if there are many callers. And you can go to Taki's blog for more information or QSL via Clublog OQRS. ZC4 is the UK sovereign base on Cyprus. This was a rare one for me for a long time, and frankly, I still need it on many band slots. G4WXJ, Dave should be QRV now until April 11th, again from ZC4. He'll be running 100 watts into dipoles and an end-fed halfway. Activity will be on 40 through 6 meters on CW, sideband, FT8, and FT4. Paul, GW0NGA, will be from Jamestown, St. Helena as ZD7PG, April 12th to the 19th. Not on the air every day, he says, because he's looking forward to relaxing on the beautiful island. He says he will have plenty of time to be on the air and will sort out QSLing when he's back in the UK. He's not an active EQSLer or an LOTW user, but he might knock out some EQSLs if asked. Well-known Pacific traveler JA1XGI will be active from French Polynesia on the island OC-066 as 7 X-Ray 7 X-Ray Golf from April 9th to the 15th. He will be QRV on HF bands plus satellite. You can QSL his home call, which is JA1XGI again, and he will do LOTW uploads free of charge after the DXpedition. The most recent DX Mentor podcast is available this weekend. It is a conversation with Jeffrey, K1ZN. He is an author, a DXpert, and an avid IoT ham. I know you will enjoy this because I had a blast talking to him. You can also check out the DX Mentor Facebook page in order to keep tabs on what is current and what is coming. Until next week, this is Bill, AJ8B, saying 7-3, and thanks to my XYL Karen for her love and support. I hope to hear you in the pileups. Have a great DX week.
ARRL Learning and Education Manager Steve Goodgame, K5ATA, attended the National Science Teachers Association convention held in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, March 26th through the 29th. More than 15,000 educational professionals from around the world were in attendance. ARRL had a booth in the exhibit hall to promote the ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology. Good Game spoke to the several hundred highly qualified and interested teachers about ways to elevate their STEM curriculum using radio. Additionally, several state and district level officials expressed interest in hosting a session of Teachers Institute. The first components of the new ARRL STEM curriculum were also unveiled and shared with teachers. Teachers were excited to have access to a curriculum utilizing electronics and amateur radio that was aligned to national education standards. The curriculum will be available beginning with the 2025-2026 school year.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available as an on-demand stream from Spotify, Deezer, and wherever podcasts are available.
Welcome to the 33rd segment of Ham Radio History, a century of amateur radio. Ham's organizations, events, inventions. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR. Our thanks go to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for permitting us to use his website in the preparation of these segments. Now, make yourself comfortable and enjoy this chapter of Ham Radio History. Crossings 1, Aquitania, continued. Public interest in the test ran high in Europe, especially in the Netherlands, France, and Britain, where details were published in their national radio journals. A Burndep 3 Ultra receiver would be awarded by Burnham and Company of England, as announced by Mr. W. W. Burnham, one of England's leading amateurs. The prize would go to the ARRL member whose signals rank first in the reception in the British Isles, though it was unclear how the ranking would be judged. British Marconi Station, MUU, at Carvarnon planned to transmit nightly test reports at 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. In QST, A.L. Groves described apparatus he recommended for receiving MUU on 14,200 meters while dealing with possible QRM from NSS on 16,900, WGG on 16,100, and WII on 13,600. In particular, he noted that in some nearby areas, NSS and WGG heterodyne with each other, creating a problem within 3,000 or 4,000 meters of these waves. In an example of how exquisitely complicated tuning an advanced receiver was in his day, Groves instructed readers that, with dual lateral coil 1500 in the secondary, shunted by a 43-plate 0.001 microfarad condenser, WII tunes in at about 50 degrees on the 180-degree scale, and MUU should tune in at not over 53 degrees. The filament and B battery are, of course, adjusted in the usual manner. Then the secondary condenser is adjusted to approximately the figures above indicated. The plate coil is gradually brought closer to the secondary until the tube oscillates, which is indicated by a thud in the phones. With the primary coil about 2 to 2.5 inches from the secondary, slowly vary the primary condenser until the set is balanced out. After signals are picked up, they can be brought in clearer and stronger by further adjustment of primary coupling, accomplished by slight changes in primary condenser. After that, a slow loosening of the plate coupling will almost always give additional amplification. Today, this seems rather like running through an alignment procedure each time you turn your receiver to a new frequency. The December 1921 QST cover drawing by 8ZZ announced transatlantic tests this month in large type across a globe where lightning bolts linked North America to England and QRM babies were labeled tightly to the North Pole spike where they presumably would do no harm. In America, a ham sits at his station keying his transmitter with the old man looking on. In England, a ham listens intently through headphones tightened firmly in place with a C-clamp over his head. Another gentleman looks on, perhaps the British equivalent of the old man, or perhaps Mr. Burnham. Inside, a photograph captured Schnell and Warner on board the Aquitania seeing Paul Godley off on his voyage to England. A send-off dinner had been held for him in New York the night before departure, attended by luminaries including Maxim, Herbert, Camp, Stewart, Service, Goat, E.H. Armstrong, J. Andrew White, P.H. Boucheron, G.H. Burghardt, and W.S. Smith. Among the testimonials, Armstrong was quoted as saying, "I'll stake my scientific reputation on Paul Godley. It's hard to imagine a stronger endorsement." On the morning of 15 November, the Aquitania was set to sail for England. Amid the commotion of the multitude at the dock and on board the departing ship, the radio birds used opening, closing hand gestures to send Morse code messages back and forth to Godley, standing at the ship's railing above all the QRM of the crowd. By coincidence, Dr. Harold H. Beveridge, inventor of the wave antenna, also happened to be aboard Aquitania for this voyage, something neither Godley nor anyone else in the crowd had known beforehand. The wave antenna was later named the Beveridge antenna. Dr. Beveridge was 28 years old at the time of the voyage, 4 years younger than Godley. Recognizing the well-known antenna experimenter at the railing a short distance from Godley, the group on the dock let him know by this hand Morse. Godley immediately went over to introduce himself, the two having never before met in person. Beveridge, who had noticed the gesturing too, signaled OK to the crowd as he shook hands with Godley, a striking metaphor for what was to come. Godley carried with him information about the final schedules and the all-important cipher combinations, messages that were known ahead of time only to ARRL traffic manager Schnell, in a sealed packet that Corsi would open and become the only person to know them on the receiving side of the Atlantic. In addition to the nightly reports transmitted by MUU, Beveridge's station, 2BML, manned by operators from RCA's Long Island receiving station in Riverbend, New York, would retransmit the reports on 200-meter CW. ARRL gratefully acknowledged the help of both companies, Marconi and RCA. Godley's own 28-page account of the entire operation, including much of his minute-by-minute log, appeared in February 1922 QST and makes interesting reading. For several nights after leaving New York, the amateur air was thick with farewells and good wishes for 2ZE, Godley's home call, for everybody knew he would be in the static room on the Aquitania, wrote Warner. And so he was, spending much of his time with the operators in the radio room, enjoying their hospitality. Although he had access to the ship's station, there was no time to tune for amateur signals because of the high volume of regular message traffic. He nevertheless received messages from U.S. friends via commercial wireless transmissions to the ship. A message from ARRL that he copied himself on his second day at sea read, "From Hartford, Connecticut to Paul F. Godley, SS Aquitania via WBF. Bon voyage. The entire radio world is pulling for you. Signed, Warmax Schnell." This signature was for Warner, Maxim, and Schnell. He replied, "Confidence increases as distance squared. Broadcast my heartfelt appreciation." Heartened by the well-wishers' messages, he resolved to get signals or bust. Keeping in mind the skepticism and what he termed veiled interest from the engineering community of which he was a member, and feeling that no ham in Britain believed the test would succeed, Paul Godley was eager to prove them all wrong. Included in this material are quotes from the following: QRV for the Transatlantics, QST, November 1921, page 10, Clinton B. DeSoto, 200 meters and down, the American Radio Relay League Incorporated, 1936, page 73, The Second Transatlantic Test, QST, December 1921, page 7, Paul F. Godley, Official Report on the Second Transatlantic Tests, QST, February 1922, page 14. With our thanks to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for his permission to use his website's materials, Ham Radio History, A Century of Amateur Radio, Ham's Organizations, Events, Inventions, to set up this chapter, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, reporting for This Week in Amateur Radio.
The Dwingello radio telescope has successfully bounced a radio signal off the planet Venus and back to Earth. Transmitting at 1,299.5 MHz, operators transmitted a 278-second-long tone. While Dwingello received its own signal, the Starkert radio telescope located in Germany also received the same signal. The data analysis consists of correcting the received data for both the expected Doppler shift and the rate of change of this Doppler shift due to the rotations and relative motions of Earth and Venus. After channelizing the received signal in 1 Hz frequency bins, the echo of the transmitted signal falls exactly in the predicted bin. Dwingello is planning another Venus bounce in October of 2026.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. Recently, I started an experiment I plan to run for a year. Using a whisper beacon and a dummy load, I'm transmitting 200 milliwatts 24 hours a day across all bands supported by my hardware. In this case, it covers 80, 40, 30, 20, 17, 15, 12, and 10 meters. The aim of the experiment is to determine if and to what extent my dummy load can be heard outside my shack. Why? Because I've not seen anyone do this, and because a dummy load is widely believed to not radiate, despite evidence to the contrary. Together with the transmission side, I've also configured an RTL SDR dongle, initially with the telescopic antenna it came with. Now, since my HF antenna isn't being used by the beacon, I'm using it instead. It's about 5 meters away from the beacon, outside. It's a helically wound whip resonant on the 40-meter band built by Walter, Victor Kilo 6 Bravo Charlie Papa, now silent key. It's what I've been using as my main antenna for the past 7 years or so. While I'm telling you this, my beacon has been heard by my dongle 1,182 times across all 8 bands. Some of those reports were from inside the shack, some from outside, some while I was monitoring a single band, and for the past week or so, I've been monitoring all the bands supported by RTL SDR Whisper D, 18 in all. Purposely, this includes some bands that I'm not transmitting on because who knows what kinds of harmonics I might discover. The receiver changes band every half hour, so over time, when I monitor a band, we'll shift across the day. This is deliberate. I don't know when a stray transmission might suddenly appear, and this will give me the best chance of hearing it, short of using 18 different receivers. At this time, my beacon hasn't been heard by any other station. I'm not expecting it to, but that's why I'm doing this experiment in the first place. I'm not in any way reaching any sense of DX on a dummy load, but it got me thinking. My beacon can be heard, albeit by me, from 5 meters away, so it's radiating to some extent. I've already discussed that this might come from the patch lead between the beacon and the dummy load, or it could be the dummy load itself, or some other aspect of the testing configuration. Regardless of the situation, there's a signal coming from my beacon that's wirelessly being heard by a receiver. That's the same as what you'd hope to achieve with any antenna. So in what way are an antenna and a dummy load different? And in what way are they the same? Whenever someone asks this, the stock answer is that an antenna radiates and a dummy load doesn't. My experiment, 20 days in, has already proven that this distinction is incomplete, if not outright wrong. Even so, if we take it on face value and we say, for argument's sake, that a dummy load doesn't radiate and an antenna does, then how do we materially distinguish between the two? How does an antenna compare to a dipole, Yagi, or vertical antenna, and where does the isotropic radiator fit in this? The best I've come up with so far is a spectrum line comparing the various elements. Let's say that at one end of the spectrum is a dummy load, at the other is an isotropic radiator. To refresh your memory, that's the ideal radiator. It radiates all RF energy in all directions equally. Somewhere between the two ends is a dipole. We might argue if the dipole sits equally between a dummy load and an isotropic radiator, but where does a Yagi or a vertical fit in relation to the dipole? Also, if you turn a Yagi in the other direction, does it change place? So perfect this notion is not, but here's my question. What's the measurement along the axis between the dummy load and the isotropic radiator? It's not SWR, since the ideal antenna and a dummy load share the same SWR, unless this line is a circle that I don't know about. It might be total radiated power expressed in watts. But that seems counterintuitive. It would mean that in order to determine the effectiveness of an antenna, we'd need to set up in an anechoic chamber, basically a warehouse-sized room where incoming radiation is shielded to some predetermined standard. Do we measure gain using a VNA and call it a day, or is there something else going on? Remember, we're attempting to quantify the difference between a dummy load and an antenna. In case you're wondering, I'm asking the question. In the 15 years I've been part of this community, I've never seen any coherent response. The internet seems to return a variation on the radiation versus not radiation pattern, but so far I've not seen anyone quantify this. Or perhaps I haven't understood it while it was staring me in the face. I even checked the syllabus for the 3 license classes in Australia. The single reference that the regulator appears to specify is that at the introductory level you are required to, wait for it, recall that when testing a transmitter, a non-radiating load, or dummy load, is commonly used to prevent a signal from being radiated. Very illuminating. Obviously, my dummy load is of the wrong type, the radiating variety, which begs the question, if there's an ideal radiator, is there a theoretical ideal dummy load that doesn't radiate in any way? And if so, how far away on this line is it from my actual dummy load? Over to you. What are your thoughts on this? Better yet, got any references? I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima Alpha Bravo.
Last October, NOAA and NASA announced that SolarMax has arrived. Only half the sun got the memo. The majority of solar activity has been happening in just one of the sun's hemispheres, the south. The solar superstorm of May 10, 2024, for instance, was caused by a monster southern sunspot. It makes you wonder, is the other half of SolarMax still coming? For forecasters of the solar cycle, this raises an interesting possibility. Maybe the northern peak is still coming. Indeed, there are signs in February 2025 that the pendulum is swinging. This current month, March, sunspots have been more evenly distributed between the two hemispheres, a sign that activity may be shifting north. This discussion focuses attention on the north-south balance of sunspots. A northern shift in the months ahead could herald a second peak and another year or two of excellent auroras before Solar Cycle 25 finally peters out.
The Federal Communications Commission this week launched an inquiry to explore commercial technologies that would complement the global positioning system. Although GPS is indispensable to America's economic and national security, it represents a single point of failure that can be vulnerable to disruption or manipulation by our adversaries. That is why leaders from President Trump to Chairman Cruz and Senator Markey have called to develop alternative systems that provide position, navigation, and timing data, referred to as PNT data. PNT data is integral to countless military, public safety, agricultural, and commercial activities. Because the American economy and national security depend on GPS as the sole source of PNT data, the U.S. government has shown great interest in developing resilient backups that would protect critical operations from any disruption in GPS signals. The Notice of Inquiry adopted today examines how the Commission might foster GPS complements and alternatives. The notice asks about a wide array of PNT technologies under development by broadcasters, wireless operators, satellite constellations, and startups that use FCC-licensed spectrum. It also seeks comment on the trade-offs among those emerging PNT offerings based on factors like performance, adoption, scale, geographic coverage, durability, cost, and commercialization. The Commission intends to build a comprehensive record on what actions it can take to strengthen GPS and promote other PNT technologies. These actions could include FCC rule changes, public-private partnerships, test beds, innovation zones, and more.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. Here we are in April, and it will not be long before Field Day is upon us. Now would be a good time to start getting your satellite gear ready and to try making a few contacts so that you're comfortable. Get some good practice now, because operating now is nothing like operating on Field Day. You might find it easy to make a contact now, with plenty of satellites, lots of breaks in the QSOs to allow you to be heard. However, on Field Day, all that changes. You will hear so many stations that it will be difficult to get that one station to come back to you. To secure a contact, try making your contacts now on a pass that is 70 to 90 degrees overhead for you. Make the contacts the first 3 to 5 minutes of the pass, or the last 3 to 5 minutes of the pass. The reason I say this is the lower to the horizon the satellite is to you, the fewer stations there will be. Even though this is hard to do, it is really your best chance to make a contact on Field Day. Thinking that a high 90-degree pass will make it easy for you is wrong. When the satellite is directly overhead, it is the worst time to get into the satellite. The antenna will not be in a favorable position to hear you. Start your practicing early, whether it is with an HT, a mobile radio, or a satellite radio. Get comfortable with what you're doing. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time for this week's propagation and solar weather forecast. This past week, a minor solar storm raised alarms for power grids in the United States. A strong M9.8 class flare sent a coronal mass ejection directed towards Earth. Solar activity is likely to be moderate with a slight chance for X-class flares through April 5th. The geomagnetic field is expected to be quiet to minor storm levels on April 4th and 5th. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration geomagnetic activity probabilities for April 5th and 6th forecast a 15% chance, and then a 1% chance, of a moderate storm for the reporting period. The forecast of solar and geomagnetic activity calls for a chance for R1 and R2 effects throughout the outlook period due to multiple complex regions on the visible disk, as well as on the Sun's far side that are likely to return. A slight chance exists for strong R3 events over the next 3 days, primarily due to the flare potential from complex regions in the Sun's eastern hemisphere. Looking at the 10.7 centimeter flux, it will be 180 on April 5th and 6th, and 185 on April 7th and 8th. Strong radio blackouts were observed on March 28th and minor radio blackouts were observed March 27th through the 30th. The predicted sunspot numbers are 149 on April 5th, 147 on April 6th, 144.6 on April 7th, and 141.7 on April 8th. For more information concerning radio propagation, visit the ARRL Technical Information Service, read what the numbers mean, a quick guide to HF propagation using solar indices, and check out the propagation page of Karl Lewetzelschwab, K9LA. You can find customizable propagation charts. Visit the VOCAP online for ham radio website.
In Radio Sport this week, many great contests. April 5th through the 6th, there are 9 contests. The YBDXPI single sideband contest, that's phone. The EA Ready contest, that's digital. The RSGP FT8 International Activity Day, that's FT4. The Georgia State Parks on the Air, that is CW Phone and Digital. April 5th through the 6th, the Louisiana QSO Party, CW Phone and Digital. The Mississippi QSO Party, CW Phone and Digital. The VHF-UHF Missouri QSO Party, that's CW Phone and Digital. And the Florida State Parks on the Air, CW Phone and Digital. April 5th through the 6th again, the SPDX Contest, that is CW and Phone. On April 7th, the RSGB 80-meter Club Championship, that's CW. And on April 12th, the QRP ARCI Spring QSO Party, that is also CW. April 12th through the 13th, there are 7 contests, all right together. On April 12th through the 13th, the JIDX Contest, CW. The Digi QSO Party, that's CW. The OKOMDX Contest, single sideband and phone. The Yuri Gagarin International DX Contest, CW and phone. The IGRY Worldwide RTTY Contest, that's digital. And the Texas State Park on the Air, that's CW Phone and Digital. April 12th through the 13th as well, the New Mexico QSO Party, that's CW Phone and Digital. April 12th, the Africa FT4 DX Contest, that's FT4. April 12th through the 13th, the North Dakota QSO Party, CW Phone and Digital. The Georgia QSO Party, CW and Phone. And on April 13th, it's the ARRL Rookie Roundup, single sideband and phone. So remember to visit the ARRL contest calendar for more events and information in your area. Upcoming section, state, and division conventions. On April 5th, it's the RARS Fest, hosting the ARL North Carolina State Convention. That's in Raleigh, North Carolina. April 11th through 12th, the Greene County Ham Fest, hosting the ARRL Oklahoma State Convention in Claremore, Oklahoma. April 25th through the 27th, the Big Bear Ham Escape, hosting the ARRL Orange Section Convention at Big Bear Lake, California. April 26th, the Delmarva Amateur Radio and Electronics Expo, hosting the ARRL Delaware State Convention in Georgetown, Delaware. And on April 26th, the Spokane Ham Fest, hosting the ARRL Washington State Convention in Spokane Valley, Washington. Remember to search the ARRL Ham Fest and Convention database to find more events in your area. The Nassau Area Radio Society's Ham Boot Camp will be held Saturday, May 10th, 2025. The online event from 10 a.m. until 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is open to everyone and designed for newly licensed hams, experienced hams, or anyone just exploring the hobby. Boot Camp will offer demonstrations and tutorials, including building a station, getting on the air, and VHF equipment and activities. Special sessions include FT8, emergency communications, and operating via satellites. Whether you're interested in local communications, DXing or contesting, or just having fun on the air, there's something there for everyone. For more information or to register, visit arrl.org.
FRAM2 launched on April 1st, 2025 at 014650 UTC. The FRAM2 mission is set to become the first human spaceflight in polar orbit, flying over the North and South Poles. Named after the famous polar exploration ship Fram, which completed voyages to both the Arctic and Antarctic, we want to showcase pioneering spirit, wonder, and technological innovation through the ages. The SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket launched 4 astronauts from Europe and Australia into orbit for 3 to 5 days. On board the Dragon spacecraft are Mission Commander Chun Wang of Malta, Vehicle Commander Jannicke Mikkelsen of Norway, Pilot Rebea Roque of Germany, and Mission Specialist Eric Phillips of Australia. During the FRAM2 mission, Rebea Roque, LB9NJ, and KD3AID will be operating the onboard amateur radio system, sending SSTV images as part of a high school and university student competition. These SSTV images will also be available to be received by the general public during the mission. SSTV transmissions will be transmitted on 437.550 MHz FM using Robot 36. Anyone may submit images to the gallery on the https://ariss.usa.org/SSTV/submit.php page, along with information about when and where the image was received. Please note that because the Fram to Ham event is a competition, all submitted images will be held in a queue not available for viewing until after the competition judges have had a chance to make their decisions. After the winners have been announced, the Fram to Ham images will be available for viewing the same as all the other ISS SSTV campaign images. Teams and members of the general public are asked to not distribute copies of their received images to social media until after the winners of the competition have been announced. And as we come to the air this week, we see that Rabea Roque, LB9NJ/KD3AID, a private astronaut on the crew of the Fram-2 mission, has conducted the first amateur radio contacts from aboard a SpaceX Dragon capsule. The Fram-2 flight sets many firsts, including being the first crewed mission to do polar orbits of the Earth, and Roque became the first German woman in space. The mission is funded and commanded by cryptocurrency billionaire Chun Wang. He wrote on X about the first day of the mission. Rabea spent some time on the ham radio, making contact with Berlin. Roque is using a battery-powered ICOM IC705 aboard the flight. Roque will send images from polar regions that have been broken into digital puzzle pieces, which students must assemble. More information can be found on www.fram2ham.com.
We pause for stations along the network to identify. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, available as a direct download on our website at www.twiar.net.
April 2025 is a centennial milestone for the International Amateur Radio Union. Founded in Paris in 1925, IARU is the worldwide federation of national amateur radio organizations. The membership of IARU consists of more than 160 member societies in as many countries and separate territories. ARRL serves as its international secretariat. Each year, World Amateur Radio Day on April 18th honors this global organization of goodwill. IARU has chosen the theme of A Century of Connections, celebrating 100 years of amateur radio innovation, community, and advocacy for World Amateur Radio Day 2025. ARRL's Ham Radio Open House is centered around sharing the international asset of amateur radio with the public. Radio knows no borders, and all are welcome to be part of ham radio. Find or host an ARRL Ham Radio Open House in your area to help share it in your community.
A couple of silent keys to tell you about this week. First, an amateur radio operator who gained a following in western Pennsylvania as a DJ and later the host of conservative talk radio has become a silent key. Jim Quinn, W3VEX, got his start on the professional side of radio at KQV-AM as a top 40 disc jockey, and later with the giant WTAE. In the years that followed, his broadcast career delivered roles as a morning DJ on other music stations during the rise of FM Top 40 radio. Moving later to WPGB-FM, Jim became co-host of a conservative radio talk show. He was a well-known voice on the air, particularly among Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania listeners. Jim became a silent key on Sunday, March 30th. No cause of death was immediately given. In all, he had more than 4 decades in commercial radio, from Pennsylvania to Cleveland to New York City and upstate Buffalo, New York. His amateur radio career lasted even longer. According to his page on QRZ.com, Jim was first licensed as a teenager while living in his native New Jersey. He was 82. And finally, hams in Arizona are grieving the loss of one of their own, a well-regarded member of the Mingus Mountain Repeater Group. It took very little time for Dan Crouch, KF7DC, to find a home with the Mingus Mountain Repeater Group in Arizona. Not long after he got his license in 2012, he found his way there and soon became part of the Mingus Mountain Round Table. He served as a moderator of the Round Table for many years. Dan became a silent key during the weekend of March 15th. He was a full-time minister for more than 50 years, serving for 20 years at the Fountain of Life Community Church in Prescott Valley. In announcing his death on Facebook, Patrick Brower, N7ATG, vice president of the Mingus Mountain Radio Group, recalled the prayers and strength Dan was able to provide for others, especially when members of the ham radio community or their families experienced a loss.
There are no more signals from VP8 ADE from Adelaide Island, the ice-covered island off the Antarctic Peninsula's west coast. The last day on the air for the 28 MHz low-power research beacon was the 21st of February. It was put into service in the summer of 1979 at the British Antarctic Survey Base of Rothera. Its tour of duty was originally supposed to have lasted only 3 years as one part of a research program, according to Lawrence Howell, KL7L, who was the base radio operator at the time. The beacon's collection of critical data on global ionospheric propagation at the F2 layer proved so invaluable that it continued operating for another 4 decades. The beacon shared a small wooden hut with a 1950-era aircraft navigation beacon and with research equipment used for ionospheric D-layer scintillation research used by students of ionospheric researcher Dr. Roy Pigott. VP8ADE was proposed by the Radio Society of Great Britain. It was coordinated with the British Antarctic Survey and the Falkland Island Radio Regulator.
A major licensee of low-power television stations across the U.S. has filed a petition for rulemaking with the FCC that would allow one of its properties to broadcast in the 3GPP-approved 5G broadcast standard. In a petition of rulemaking submitted Friday with the Commission for its consideration by Wilkinson, Burker, Nauer, Counsel David O'Connor, and Jeffrey G., HC2 Broadcasting requests the authorization of permissive use of 5G broadcast as a transmission standard for low-power TV stations. Use would be on a voluntary basis, the petition states, and would open LPTV station owners to achieve what broadcasters in Europe are moving forward with. Bringing the benefits of increased 5G services would require very few rule modifications, HC2 argues, through its WBK attorneys, adding that the rule amendments it proposes are limited to incorporating the 5G broadcast standard into the rules and authorizing its use by LPTV stations on a voluntary basis. While the proposal includes a requirement to deliver at least one free-to-air standard definition signal, with the remaining capacity available for ancillary and supplementary services, the Commission is being asked to decide whether the time has come to allow all 6 MHz of LPTV spectrum to be exclusively devoted to datacasting without the need for a free-to-air signal, given the ubiquitous nature of 5G capability devices. Indeed, HC2 is planting the seed that a requirement to carry any programming and instead focus on data delivery be considered, with the proposal purposely limited to LPTVs. The LPTV Broadcasters Association founder and head, Super Frank Kopsidis, has been a vocal supporter of 5G broadcast and a detractor of ATSC 3.0. HC2 addresses the debate of 5G broadcast versus ATSC 3.0, stating, limited 5G broadcast eligibility to LPTV stations will mitigate any impact on the rollout of ATSC 3.0 by full power and Class A TV stations. Further, the proposal, it argues, will not impact other industry partners. It argues will not impact other industry partners because the petition does not propose any mandates on TV manufacturers or any changes impacting multi-channel video programming distributor operations. HC2 concludes, for too long, broadcasters have been restricted by the Commission from making market-based decisions that will allow their businesses to be more visible and benefit the public. From a policy standpoint, the Commission should encourage market-driven innovation by allowing LPTV stations to use the 5G broadcast transmission standard on a voluntary basis if they do elect to do so, as demonstrated in this petition. The public stands to benefit from allowing LPTV stations to make that decision.
The ARRL is excited to announce that the new 2025 edition of the ARRL Repeater Directory is now powered by RepeaterBook, amateur radio's worldwide repeater database. This collaboration ensures that amateur radio operators across the country have access to one of the most comprehensive and up-to-date collections of repeater information available, said Garrett Dow, KD6KPC of RepeaterBook. Dow points out that a paper book is an invaluable resource when all else fails. In emergencies, reliable communication can make all the difference. Repeater book data in the repeater directory helps ensure that first responders, ARES teams, and everyday hams have fast access to the most accurate repeater information when it matters most, he said. For decades, the ARRL repeater directory has been an invaluable source for locating repeater frequencies while traveling. It includes crowdsourced listings contributed to Repeater Book by users, repeater owners, and volunteer frequency coordinators. This means more listings updated more often. New hams often use the repeater directory to find local repeaters to use after purchasing a new handheld radio. Public service volunteers often keep a copy nearby or in their emergency go kit. The repeater directory this year is a convenient 6 by 9 inches and sports a lay-flat spiral binding. It includes 22,319 listings for the U.S. and Canada organized by state, province, county, and city-town. A location indicator for many repeaters in cities and towns, additional information on ARES and Skywarn affiliations, emergency power, and more. It includes digital repeaters, including System Fusion, D-Star, DMR, NXDN, M17, Tetra, and P25. It also has HF, VHF, and UHF and microwave band plans, information on radiograms, and updated ARRL codes. For more information about Repeater Book, visit www.repeaterbook.com, and the Repeater Book app is available on both the Apple App Store and Google Play.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
Even as White House cuts to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration leave the agency's future operations in question, the next generation of amateurs has been training well to keep an eye on the dangerous weather for the public. If you worked N0A during the last half of March, you were talking with a member of the Skywarn YouthNet, which meets weekly to encourage severe weather monitoring by young hams across the United States. As most hams who are active during severe weather are beginning to age out, groups like this can help encourage a new generation of Skywarn supporters. The net was founded in 2016 by Jim Sellers, N0UAM, who is now a silent key, to encourage youth participation in reporting severe weather. Net manager Caleb Sfair, KE0FOE, got his license in 2015 at age 11 and joined the net 2 years later at the encouragement of his father George, KJ6TQ. The Skywarn YouthNet uses a system of linked repeaters from various parts of the United States, along with All-Star Link, Echolink, DMR, and Yaesu Fusion. Meeting on Sunday evenings at 7:30 p.m. Central Time, the net gives young hams an opportunity to share weather reports and learn more about participating in severe weather activations. Anyone, young or old, is invited to check in. For more information, you can visit skywarnyouth.net.
There's a vacancy to be filled in the popular Islands on the Air program, and hams who are knowledgeable about IOTA are being encouraged to apply for the volunteer position. The Islands on the Air award scheme is in need of an experienced amateur who can serve in the voluntary position of checkpoint for Brazil, a post filled since 2009 by Luciano Sampaio de Souza, PT7WA. However, he has recently informed the board that he now needs to step down. The ham who fills this post must demonstrate knowledge of the IOTA program and rules, have good English proficiency, and possess the ability to process online applications. Interested applicants should send details of the skills they would bring to the task. Email Roger Ballister, G3KMA. Applications are due no later than April 21st.
The names included in the CQ Amateur Radio Hall of Fame represent the best of the best that ham radio has had to offer through the years. Originated by CQ Magazine, the Hall of Fame is now overseen by Ham Gallery, which selects amateurs with impressive personal operating records as well as achievements that have enhanced the lives and experiences of their fellow amateur radio operators. Inductees may be living or silent keys, and they are chosen via nomination. The nominating window is drawing to a close. You have until April 15th to submit the names of your nominees to Tom Roscoe, Kilo 8 Charlie X-Ray, using email address kilo8charliexray@hamgallery.com. Ham Gallery is one word. Notifications will be sent out by April 30th as to whether the nomination was accepted or not.
And finally this week, American science fiction writer Stephen King is author of, among many things, the Dark Tower series of books. Now another tower that used to be his, an AM radio tower, more than 400 feet tall, has gone dark. It was formerly used by WZON 620 AM in Maine, one of three of the region's radio stations that used to be owned by the writer. The tower had stood since 1937, when it was first used by WLBZ, the radio station's call sign in the earliest days. Citing the financial struggles of three area radio stations he owned in Maine, King announced last year they were going to end their run. WKIT, known for its classic rock format, is still on the air, having been saved at the last minute after being bought by a media partnership known as the Rock Lobster Radio Group. WZON AM and WZLO FM went silent on December 1st. However, recent local news reports say that both stations will return under new ownership. A company called MixMain Media was buying them from King along with an FM translator. WZON's tower, however, still had to go. Local residents' affection for this longtime familiar site drew them out to the scene of the demolition on Wednesday, March 26th. The prospect of the station's return, however, did cheer them up. And so when WZON played its final song last December before turning off its transmitter, its words rang true, but only for the tower. The song was REM's The End of the World as We Know It. For This Week in Amateur Radio, this is Chris Perrine, KB2 FAF.
This Week in Amateur Radio is holding open auditions for news anchors for the weekly national worldwide amateur radio news service. If you have a good radio voice and can reliably read provided news copy, we are looking for you. This, of course, is an all-volunteer position. An amateur radio license is not required. You must have a high-quality microphone, headset mics are not used, and be familiar with audio editing software to record and edit your finished news stories before uploading. If you would like to try out for a weekly or bi-weekly anchor position with North America's premier amateur radio news on air and podcast, please send an email to our producer, George, W2XBS. You can include a sample MP3 of yourself reading news copy sent as an attachment to W2XBS77@gmail.com. That's whiskey, the number 2, X-ray Bravo Sierra 77@gmail.com. Be sure and use Anchor Audition in the subject line. Please include your phone number and a good window of time for a callback to discuss your submission and our operating logistics to see if This Week in Amateur Radio is a good fit for you. We hope to hear from you soon.
This Week in Amateur Radio is heard all around the world on the amateur bands, and on great repeater systems like the KB3 CNN Gateway FM Association repeater, on 146.730 MHz every Tuesday evening at 7:30 p.m., covering the wide area of western Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. If your repeater system carries This Week in Amateur Radio, let us know via email, and we will mention your station in an upcoming edition. Send your information to W2XBS77@gmail.com.
Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you'd like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and our news team around the world, this is Chris Perrine, KB2FAF, wishing you a 73.